idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We have a Week 16 recap. Round 2 of the playoffs is in the books. We have our final matchup set between our very own Alvernaz 13 and the commissioner, Melcrisp. So, condolences to Flea and Big, who lost in the semifinal rounds, but those were some pretty impressive matchup scores that we saw, especially on one side of that bracket.
Agreed.
Before we get over to those matchups, we're going to do what we normally do, cover any trades, cover any waivers, and cover some injuries. Only one trade to cover in the league this week, but it was some big names moving. Flea decided that she was not done, despite the fact that she had no picks left to trade. Flea acquired Tyreek Hill, and JMC got Hollywood Brown and Devonta Smith. On the eve of the semifinals, Flea added Tyreek Hill so that you could face him 2 weeks in a row in the playoffs.
Just when we thought she was out of moves. Apparently not. She pulled one last big swing on the eve of our matchup. I was not happy about this trade.
I wouldn't be thrilled to be facing Tyreek Hill at any point, let alone in the playoffs.
He's been the single most impactful fantasy producer, especially in this format, which skews pretty wide receiver heavy. He's been a monster. I dodged a bullet when he missed the game last week, and I had to face him on JMC's roster, but I wasn't as lucky this week.
He did suit up this week. He had 9 catches for 99 yards, 6 first downs, which netted him 24 points. Not a monster performance, but certainly much better than Hollywood, who's on IR, and Devonta Smith, who only put up 11 points.
He had a very good week by normal receiver standards, but a subpar Tyreek Hill performance. And when I got the alert that Jalen Waddle had gotten hurt, basically on first, very early on the game, he had one catch at that point when he went out. I was very worried that Tyreek Hill was going to have like 300 yards, but thankfully it was a tempered game on his first game back from injury.
Yeah, so she improved her lineup for this week, and she's got, another absolute monster of a boom player for her next couple of years, because, Hill slows absolutely no signs of stopping or slowing down, even though he's getting closer to 30.
The fact that she managed to acquire Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill back to back week is just ridiculous. I don't understand. She just continued to add ridiculous talent, and she had a monster week this week. It helped her team. Just unfortunately, she had to play me instead of the other side of the bracket. But I really like the trade from JMC's side. This was something that he really needed to do. We've been saying all year how he was lacking depth. He had a good lineup roster, but not a good best ball roster. And some of his pieces were getting older, Tyreek Hill being one.
Yep.
What he really needed to do was figure out how to multiply his assets and get younger. And he did exactly that with this trade. He swapped out Tyreek Hill, and he got back 2 other top 24-ish receivers in Hollywood Brown and Devonta Smith. Got, significantly younger and lengthened his lineup for next year.
Yeah, it was a good move for both players. Hollywood Brown wasn't going to do anything. He was out this week.
Not that he's done anything the last few
fair
months.
So from Flea's perspective, she swaps out one active player for another active player, and one with a much higher ceiling. And as you said, for JMC, it was a matter of getting younger and, to use your phrase, multiplying your assets. So, 2 for 1 is what you're looking for at this point in an early stage. I don't know if rebuild is the right word, but reset on his part.
Yeah, he's not rebuilding. He's not tearing it down. but he is looking to kind of get a little more balanced. He had a very narrow scoring output this year from a handful of players, so it'll do his team good going forward if he can kind of spread the wealth a little, get some more contributors on this roster. So It was a smart trade from both sides. I mean, a stroke of genius from Flea. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. That's just the random variance of a 1 week playoff. But being able to add a player of that caliber when you're out of draft picks for the next 3 years is is impressive in its own right. Just figuring out a way to do that. I can tell you that I don't want to play her team next year in the playoffs.
No, I don't want to play her team ever.
Yeah.
It's a scary team. She's facing big this week for the third place matchup, and it would not shock me to see either one of their teams put up a week like you just had.
Right. I mean, these were the number 1 and number 2 scorers on the season. They were consistently the highest scorers week after week. Unfortunately, on the wrong end of variance this week. But yeah, that third place game could feature a lot of fireworks.
All right, so that was our only trade. We had no significant waivers to speak of this week, so we're going to skip right over that and go to...
As usual.
Yeah, no, this is not new. We're gonna skip over that section and head over to the injuries.
Somehow we never have any impactful waivers, yet I never have any fab. What am I spending my fab on is what I would like to know.
I know the answer to this. You spent $20 on Braxton Berrios. Why? No one knows. You didn't know at the time.
Well, there's nothing else to spend it on.
Less than a day later, you were like, I have no idea why I did that.
Clearly, there's nothing else to spend it on. So,
all right, injuries. We had a few this week. A couple that'll impact your team. Not much that's going to affect Mel in the finals, but we'll get there in a minute.
It's not great.
We're going to start at the quarterback position. Trevor Lawrence makes his 5th consecutive appearance on this segment. He's got an AC joint sprain this time. He left the game. CJ Beathard finished. Didn't look terrible. Didn't look great, but
yeah. Well, he didn't leave immediately when it happened. He was scrambling and he stretched out and kind of hit the ground on it, and he stayed in to finish the drive, and then he came out. So it's maybe just adrenaline got him through the drive.
I don't know.
He wasn't playing great, so
no, he was not. I think he's still banged up from some other things as well. I think his ankle's probably not feeling great. He had another shoulder thing earlier in the year, didn't he?
Yeah, he's been banged up for a good portion of the year.
Yeah, and obviously the concussion recently, but hopefully that's not still affecting him, because if it is, he shouldn't be playing.
Right.
They're still in the midst of a very tight playoff race, so he's going to want to be out there, and
they are fading fast. They need him because the team is kind of crumbling down the stretch here. It's not great.
We'll keep an eye on that one. Obviously, there are a lot of fantasy relevant pieces attached there, but I don't think any of them are in our finals matchup here.
Yeah, not unless
Zay Jones
plays.
I was to say
he's week to week still, so
yeah.
I don't know if he's going to play. He hasn't practiced at all since he's been hurt, so it seems unlikely. Unless he can get some practice in this week.
Yeah, and if it's CJ Beathard, even if Zay Jones is back, I wouldn't count on him doing anything.
Right, but we may see CJ Beathard in the
That's true.
in the fantasy final, because I know you're itching to trade him.
I've been trying for weeks, but Trevor Lawrence, damn it, keeps playing through every injury.
Every time we're like, oh, he's definitely going to miss time. And nope. Sure enough, he's out there. It doesn't look great, but he's been out there.
And I don't know about Mel. He's got a lot of QB options at this point, but I'm pretty sure you could use some depth at the position.
Oh, yeah. Pretty badly. Honestly, I'm going to be looking at quarterback options this week. I could use some help.
Well, we'll see how that one shakes out. One other quarterback injury that probably won't be available for trade is Brock Purdy, who had a stinger. This is a re-injury for him, right?
Yeah, he had a stinger a couple of weeks ago that we thought was a concussion, and then they said, no, it's not a concussion, it's a stinger. And then, it looked like another stinger this week. According to the team, I think it was stinger / poor performance is what got him out
he
of this
was
game.
Not having a good day.
The Ravens were destroying the 49ers and pretty much wrapping up the MVP race for Lamar Jackson because Purdy had a pretty good case to be made, him and CMC. But I think after that national television meltdown, probably going to go to Lamar now if I was handicapping the race.
Yeah, it certainly seems like Lamar has jumped to the forefront of that race, which is why I'm very glad that I cashed out my Lamar for MVP shares a few weeks ago. That was a smart move on my part.
Another one of your bad beats.
Well, not exactly, because I bet him, I think like 3 or 4 weeks into the season, and I got very good odds on it at that point. And then I cashed out just after they beat Jacksonville, and I got a 3.5 to 1 return, but I was like, it wasn't a large wager. It was only like $10 or something like that. But I was like, well, I can cash this out now for like, I think it was $37 or something like that. So I did. And I guess I really should have kept that one rolling to win closer to $200 later on.
Well, bird in hand and all that,
Yeah, exactly. I looked at the profit that I had and I was like, you know what? I can get out on this. I can
make 37 $1 bets.
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm going to do. All right, so maybe I'll make one of those $1 bets on somebody else for MVP and hope that Lamar fades down the stretch.
There's not much stretch left. There's only 2
true.
weeks, so
it's fair. All right, so those are the only quarterback injuries of note, but we did have some wide receiver injuries this week. Of specific interest to you was Jalen Waddle leaving with a high ankle sprain.
Yeah, it hasn't been a great season for Waddle. It's been a little disappointing, probably because Tyreek Hill is a monster and he's always open for long touchdowns. He doesn't leave a lot for Waddle. We did see the one game without Tyreek. Waddle had a huge performance, but this week he had a big catch, 50+ yards, and then sprained his ankle. Looks like a high ankle sprain. He's probably done for the rest of the fantasy playoffs, for sure. Probably the rest of the regular season as well. Potentially into the playoffs, the real playoffs, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, he hasn't had quite the year that he had last year when they were both producing at such a high level.
Yeah, it turns out that Tyreek had another level to go even higher and was pacing over 2,000 yards. So didn't leave a lot of meat on the bone for anyone else in that offense.
That's true.
And Waddle's having a decent year by
normal wide receiver standards, yeah.
It's just, when you got a guy playing on your team that's pacing for 2,000 yards, it's tough for you to also get, like 1,500 yards, right?
It's fair. Another wide receiver injury we had, Jordan Addison left in the first quarter of the Vikings game with an ankle injury. Another one similar to Waddle.
Yep, he got hurt early in the game, wasn't able to come back, and it directly impacted Mel's team because KJ Osborne came in and had his best week in a long time. Even for all the time that Jefferson missed. He had some spots here and there where he had some production, but mostly he's been disappointing in a bigger role. But he sure performed this week. He got into Mel's lineup. He was his wide receiver 1 on the week.
Yeah, Mullins was throwing that ball pretty much everywhere. And, Jefferson back got a lot of the work, but there was more to go around for the rest of the team. You got to figure that if Addison hadn't gotten hurt, a lot of that probably would have gone his way instead of Osborne's.
Yeah, it was in fact KJ Osborne's best fantasy performance of the season. I just looked it up.
So well, something for you to look forward to next week.
Get well soon, Jordan Addison, please.
All right. So also injured at the wide receiver position this week, Courtland Sutton left with a concussion. All these guys got hurt early.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Big. He could have used some more production, but yeah, he got hurt on his first target, hit the back of his head on the ground trying to make a catch on the sidelines and didn't come back. Didn't really benefit anyone else.
No, that was
Denver. Judy didn't have any catches until late in the game. So yeah, Big didn't really help there. And Marvin Mims didn't do much for me with the extra playing time. I mean, he did more than he has done in months, but still wasn't great.
Also injured at the wide receiver position, DJ Moore hurt his right ankle. This is another one that is probably a re-injury.
Yeah, he had an ankle injury a couple of weeks ago. Seems like he tried to play through it, may have re-aggravated it in this game. He did come back, but they really only used him as a decoy for the rest of the game. So no idea how severe it actually was because he kind of gutted it out. Sometimes those guys are just running on adrenaline and they can make it through a game and then they end up missing weeks after. So
adrenaline and painkillers.
Right. They got those good shots in the locker room.
Horse tranquilizer.
That's what they do in the blue tent. That's where they keep all the good shots. Not for national TV. You got to cover that up.
DJ Moore not the only injury in that game. Also, Cole Kmet left with a knee injury.
Oh, and again, left early, but at least he had put up good production before he got hurt. He had like a
50-yard catch.
Yeah, he had like 100 yards in the first quarter. He was pacing for a monster game when DJ Moore was in and out, and Kmet was dominating, and then he hurt his knee, and no updates yet. But it looked not great, and there's not much time left in the season, and the Bears aren't going anywhere. So I assume that's going to be the last we see of Cole Kmet, and he's not going to help me this week.
Have they announced how serious it was?
No, they haven't. I'm just assuming based on how it looked in the game.
We'll keep a close watch on that one. Maybe you'll have him back.
I have doubts.
So speaking of injured tight ends with knees, TJ Hawkinson done for the year, ACL and MCL.
Yeah, he's definitely not playing this week.
That's tough. So he's on Flea's roster, right?
Yeah.
So you guys both lost tight ends in the middle of your matchup here. Unfortunately for him, this one is most assuredly season ending, and it even at this stage of the year puts the start of next year in doubt.
Right. It happened so late in the season. Now you got to be worried about the beginning of next year because it was multiple ligaments, not just an ACL, it was MCL as well.
So we'll wish him a speedy recovery and update everybody next year, I guess.
Yep.
All right, so the only running back injury of note was Isaiah Pacheco, who got a concussion when he lost his helmet in the middle of a play and took a knee to the head.
Right. That's why you wear a helmet, boys and girls.
Yeah. That was tough because you saw it happen. Like he immediately grabbed his head and like started rolling around in pain, which not shocking when you get kneed in the head by an offensive lineman.
Yeah, it was an ugly play, not one that should happen on the NFL field. He did not come back in this game, obviously.
No.
Concussion, we don't know how quickly he'll progress.
Yeah, and they were one of the Monday games, so he's got less time than you normally have to recover.
Yeah, and the Chiefs just lost McKinnon to IR. So it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire show again. Good thing they spent that first-round pick on a backup running back. They need him. This offense looks dysfunctional.
This year has not been great for Kansas City. They have nothing to show at wide receiver. I mean, I guess Rashee Rice has been fine, but even that, he looks like a good wide receiver 2 or 3. Like he doesn't look like a number 1 to me.
Well, he can't beat man coverage, which is not great.
Yeah.
So teams that are playing heavy man, just crushing them. They don't have anyone on this roster that can beat man coverage.
They're going to need to address the wide receiver room in a major way. This is a dumb one here that has been my personal conundrum for the entire year. I want to know what's going on with Richie James, because there was at one point like he was asking for his release from the team, and he was hurt for a bit, and now all of a sudden he appears to be back. And I don't think he's a great player, but I think he's better than all of their other wide receivers.
Right. The problem is they have a room full of role players.
Yeah.
They really need a Tyreek Hill type. They need an alpha that they can play off of, and they can all fulfill their normal roles. Everyone's trying to play above their weight class.
Yeah. If you had a real wide receiver 1, and then Kelsey can be your 1A or 2 at this point in his career, and then Rice is your 3, and you've got guys like Richie James and Sky Moore and
Justin Watson,
Yeah.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling. These
Exactly.
guys,
All those
they
are
have
filling
they have
in.
roles that
Yeah,
they're
they're
good
fine.
at, but these are not dependable options you can target on third and medium when you really need a completion and you need them to beat the guy and get open. It's just
Yeah.
there's too much on Mahomes. As good as he is, he's not able to
No.
elevate these guys. And we saw it this week. They had no running backs, and he was the leading rusher on the team. Like, he's doing everything he can. It's just they just don't have the pieces around him.
He's a magician, but there's only so many rabbits you can pull out of that hat.
Right. And they've tried, they took Sky Moore early in the second. They took Rashee Rice early in the second. They're taking guys. They're trying to bring guys in. They paid a lot of money to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, whether that was smart or not. I mean, they traded a first-round pick for Kadarius Toney, who hasn't done anything and is now hurt again. I mean, they're trying. It's just the pieces they're bringing in are not working out.
No.
So
yeah, you can't blame them for ignoring the problem. It's just you can blame them for not successfully addressing it.
right. It's not the Aaron Rodgers Packers where they didn't draft a receiver before the 5th round for 10 years. I mean, they're trying.
I'm
It's just
pretty
not
sure.
working.
I'm pretty sure Mahomes would kill for the Packers wide receiver room right now.
Right. That would be an upgrade.
All right, well, let's get to these matchups. So our high score this week was your team. And what a high score it was. 291.53. You beat out Flea, who put up a 243.94. Flea had the second highest score in the league this week. This was just an absolute monster of a matchup from both teams. To give a little background, your 291 puts you at the number 7 highest scoring week in league history. You just passed Judd's 2021 week 14.
Yeah, it was the second highest in the playoffs after Mel's monster 300 plus points in the first round of last year's playoffs. And Flea's 243 is the most in a playoff loss in our league history.
And it's the highest score in any loss this season as well.
Yeah, beating out her earlier season
her own, yeah.
loss. Unfortunately, she's been on the wrong end of a few of these epic battles.
We put our research department on this, and over the course of this season, there was 7, if you include this week's, there was 7 different matchups where a team scored more than 222 points and still lost. So basically that was the bar to clear. 99% of the time, if you scored over that, you were winning. The next highest was week 10. Flea lost to Big with a score of 246 to 242. This week here was probably a little bit more painful because it came in the semifinals, but this is not the first time Flea has had that big loss.
Yeah,
big score in a loss, I should say.
Being involved in this matchup, it certainly felt like a heavyweight title fight. It was like every time I checked the alerts on my phone, somebody was scoring in this matchup. It was just trading knockout punches for several days. I'm just drained emotionally and physically from trying to keep up with this ridiculous matchup.
It was pretty entertaining to watch from the outside. I obviously would have been eliminated long since been eliminated, but trying to keep track of best ball scores is difficult, but we knew even just after the Saturday games that this was going to be a very high scoring affair.
Yeah, it started with a lot of points all the way back on Thursday.
Yep.
And it just continued up until the last matchup.
The only thing I want to mention before we hop over to that to look at some of the player scores here. In week 2, we had some crazy scores in the league, and there was 3 teams in week 2 that lost with scores over 222 points. Big beat Flinch. Flinch put up a 236. Flea beat Mr. Good News, who put up a 225. And Judd beat you when you had a 222. So outside of that week, it only happened 3 other times that a team would put up that many points and lose. So it wasn't a very common occurrence.
Yeah, we almost had 2 of them this week in the playoffs. I mean, it makes sense now. These are the last 4 teams. These are the 4 best teams. There's a lot of good players. And there was a lot of points scored this week in the NFL. So
And the
figured we were gonna get
consolidation has taken place. All those good players are now on those good teams.
Yep.
Or more of those good players, I should say.
Yeah, we figured that the scores would continue to increase as the season wore on. And it certainly hasn't disappointed. There's been some fireworks in these playoffs.
All right, so let's look a little bit closer at this matchup here. So your team was led by your wide receiver position. This is the way you've constructed your team. This is what you've been trying to do all year.
Honestly,
28 points and above from a whole bunch of different wide receivers.
Yeah, honestly, my team was just balanced. I had 20 points or more from everyone in my lineup, save quarterback.
Yeah. You had
it was between 20 and 30 for every single player. I didn't have any crazy 50-point boom weeks.
Nope.
But I just had a lot of good weeks.
Yeah, your highest score was a 30.30 from DJ Chark, and your
DJ Chark of all people.
Yeah, right. And your lowest score, as you said, was Jared Goff. Only put up a 15 at your quarterback one. Your super flex spot was filled by a wide receiver. So your lowest score outside of your quarterback position was a 20.8 from Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, he had a good game. 6 catches, 113 yards, and he was barely my last flex player because everybody scored in 20 to 30 points. It was a ridiculous week. I hope I have some points left for next week because I feel like I scored all of them this week from some of the guys that made my lineup. Gabe Davis, who hasn't had a reception in 3 of the last 4 weeks, he had zeros, suddenly decides to go for 130 yards and a touchdown. I mean, DJ Chark, who has scored how many touchdowns this entire season? He just basically had his entire season's worth of production in 1 week. I mean, these were unexpected. Chikakonkwo scored his first touchdown of the season on a trick play pass from Derrick Henry.
Jump pass.
I don't know how many of these are sustainable that I can expect to happen again next week, but I certainly needed all the points I could get this week. So I'm happy it happened, but I hope I can put some more points up next week.
We'll see. You've got some, you got some guys who are very likely to be consistent week over week, like Jefferson and Olave and Lamb, those top end wide receivers. And even if they don't have quite as many points, you still expect pretty good weeks.
Yeah. And Flea had a monster week too. I mean,
she did. Yeah. She got big performances from players that she's had on her team for a long time and players that she acquired in season. It's one of those where
she acquired from me as well.
Yeah.
I see Rashid Shaheed made the lineup. Jaylen Warren made the lineup. Players I just recently traded to her came back to haunt me.
Mm-hmm. And, and she had her biggest day was
Tommy Tremble, another guy traded her, made her lineup.
Her biggest day was from Mike Evans, who had 31 points. She drafted Mike Evans in the startup draft. He's been on her team the whole time. So this isn't just, new
Mike
players
Evans
and everything either.
As illustrious as his career has been, he's having a career season. This is the best season of his career. No Jameis Winston throwing 70 times a game. No Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time, throwing to him. No, it's Baker Mayfield. That's the key. That's what they had to do to unlock Mike Evans. To have
if we had only known.
Best season of his life.
Like you said, career year. This is wild. He's 30 years old. I guess it's just going to keep going forever.
Yeah, so, she had a monster week. Just unfortunately, she got matched up against me in the playoff bracket. She would have beaten the other two teams handily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, easily. Well, not easily, but she would have certainly won.
Just a tough draw.
You go across the matchup here, and your 29-point days were 24-point days. Your 30-point days were 27-point days. That sort of thing, where she's only got a couple of. You can't even call them dud positions. Like she had Jaylen Warren in her running back 2 with 11.4. It's not the best score, but it's not the worst. An 11-point day isn't enough to sink your matchup,
Yeah, we expected more from Jonathan Taylor. He was kind of disappointing. She got good quarterback scores from the Thursday night game, but like Dak didn't have a wonderful game. Travis Etienne struggled.
That was bad, yeah.
Singletary
6 carries for 12 yards.
Singletary's been putting up 130 yards a game, and he couldn't do anything DeAndre Hopkins didn't do anything. Stephon Diggs had a disappointing week, considering how much she gave up to get him. He really didn't do anything.
I meant to say it when you discussed how well Gabe Davis played. That directly prevented Diggs from having his typical week.
Yeah, so just unfortunate. She had a really good week, but she needed even more. And she could have had it. She had plenty of good players that had insignificant weeks that have been lighting it up recently. Tough way for your season to end, to put up this many points and still lose.
I'm sure she loves hearing that from you.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, she'll be back next year in the playoffs for sure, and we'll see what magic she pulls off. Because I'm sure she's not done trading.
Once draft day comes around, then she'll get a new set of 2027 picks to move.
It's true. She might. She might just pull another Diggs and go out there and get one guy at full value there. So let's move over to our other semifinal matchup where Mel beat Big. Mel scored a 234.68. Big put up a 219.04. So a pretty solid day from Mel, and not a bad day by any means from Big, but a little bit disappointing, I think, for him.
Yeah, just not the ceiling that we've seen from him the last couple of months, really. His team's just been cruising, crushing everybody, and he was almost 220. That's a solid score in the league.
It's not a bad score by any means.
Just wasn't, the 240, 250 that he had been scoring recently. So it just wasn't enough this week, unfortunately, for our number one seed.
And he had a good day from the quarterback position, but it was his positional players that left him wanting. He had some good scores. Tight end was tough. We knew that he was very shallow at tight end. He tried to address it. He picked up Higby, who he added, made the lineup. But only it was a smart move.
Yeah, that was the bigger problem.
Yeah, the low score. And hey, on the other side of things, Kyle Pitts showing up for Mel. It's about time.
Right. Mel had some surprising leaders at his positions. KJ Osborne was wide receiver 1, DeMarcus Robinson wide receiver 2. These are guys basically pulled off the scrap heap. Not the guys you're expecting to be wide receiver 1 and 2. Yep. On a team that has guys like Cooper Kupp and AJ Brown. And then Kyle Pitts scored the rare touchdown, helped his tight end spot, which has been a bugaboo all season for him.
Man, Cooper Kupp on his bench.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp had a rough week. We saw it on the Thursday game. He had a couple of balls in the end zone that he couldn't corral that he normally does. Could have been a much bigger week.
Robinson and Puka in that game just did all the work, did what Cooper Kupp normally does to the rest of the team.
Right, not a lot to go around when those two guys are having career high games.
I would like to point out in this matchup, Joe Flacco, QB1. Just wild.
My favorite part of that is I was really hoping that Joe Flacco would sink your redraft season since you traded him to my opponent.
I don't want to talk
end
about
my
that.
season in redraft, and then you had to face him this week in redraft after he beat me.
Yep.
He wasn't really the reason you lost, but
well,
he definitely put up a big score against you.
If I hadn't made that trade, he would have lost. I would have won.
There's no guarantee he didn't do something else at quarterback. So
yeah, but I don't think anything he was doing was putting up the same game that Joe Flacco did.
368 yards and 3 touchdowns.
So assume that he gets, replacement quarterback X and loses, 12 points from his lineup, right? If he loses 12 points from his lineup, there's a good chance right there. I don't know exactly what would have happened because obviously I played HN, who I acquired from him in that trade, and HN had a bad week.
Yeah, it didn't help Big this week either.
No, that's
you guys both could have used one of those HN ceiling games, especially with Waddle going down early and them having more success running the ball. Surprising that HN didn't do anything.
And how Mostert got hurt and left the game for a bit, and how Dallas got run all over last week by Buffalo. I was really expecting more this week, and I'm sure Big was as well. And it's disappointing not to get it, but But sometimes that's how it goes.
Yep. Again, the variance and randomness of a 1 week playoff.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see Flea and Big square off in that third place matchup as you and I did last year.
Yep.
Best of luck to both of them, and I'm sure we will see both of these teams back in the playoffs next year.
Yeah, neither of them are facing any kind of crazy teardown where all their players are 35 years old. They both have very, very good teams, very deep rosters, considering all the players they've added, and mostly young cores.
Yeah,
So,
there's not a lot of old core pieces on either one of these teams. There's a few here and there, but even those pieces, like you look at a guy like Diggs or something, he's right around 30, but he seems as good as he's been ever. I'm not worried about Diggs' production next year.
right, he hasn't shown signs of slowing down.
No.
So I would expect when we do our off-season wrap and next season look ahead, yeah, these will probably be two of the top teams again.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a finals matchup set between your team and Mel's team. How do you feel?
Mel knocked me out of the playoffs last year. That's the reason I was in the third place game with you. So see if I can get a little bit of revenge. But yeah, I mean, when we did the season preview, how many months ago now? 4 months ago, 5 months ago, I said Mel's was probably the best roster from top to bottom. You know, he was strong at every position. He had depth, high-end talent, everything you look for. And sure enough, here he is in the finals. So not real shocking for me.
We definitely expected Mel to have a deep playoff run, even in the middle of the season when we were looking at the playoff odds and he was on the outside looking in. We were both fairly adamant that we thought that was probably not accurate.
Right.
So
and he was in the finals last year. So this is a second chance for him to try to get the first championship. Lost to JMC in the finals last year. So he's back for a second year. I'm sure he's itching to avenge that loss.
Mm-hmm. And this is obviously the second time you guys have faced off this year. You played each other in week 12. You won that matchup 201.49 to 185.69. So he's got a bone to pick with you from that as well.
I feel like it may take more than 201 points to win this matchup this week, but we'll see.
It seems likely, but you never know.
Based on how the scores have been the last 2 weeks.
I should mention this is actually your third matchup because you guys played in week 1 as well.
Yep.
And you won that matchup as well with a 241.03 to a 180.73. So for whatever reason, your team seems to have a psychological advantage against Mel's team.
What are the odds in the NFL when the team sweeps the season series and then they always lose the third game in the playoffs? So, I
actually don't think that's accurate. I think that's what the common conception is, but I believe that the record is actually strongly in favor of the 2-0 team.
No, I'm putting that out there. They always lose 100% of the time. They never win all three. You know how hard it is to beat the same team 3 times in one season?
Well, here's the thing. If you already beat them twice, chances are you're the better team.
It's basically impossible. Okay? Putting that out there.
This is like a reverse jinx attempt right here. I'm going to start being extra nice to Mel in chat this week.
I already have been in his DMs asking him when he's going to trade for Tyreek Hill.
I know that everyone in this league is still at least keeping an eye on the playoffs, so we're all going to be interested to see how this one goes. I wish you both the worst of luck and hope that you both score 0 points.
Now let's get to the matchup everyone really wants to talk about.
Oh yeah. So we'll update everyone here. The toilet bowl has almost run its course as well. Shocking no one. Georgia Mike and Benign Rug will be squaring off in the toilet bowl finals.
These two teams have been on a collision course since the start of the year to this point. I mean, there was no stopping either of these teams from making it to the finals.
I really wish we were a visual podcast here so everyone could see what you just did. The face, the hand motions. Yeah, these have been the 2 tanking teams since the start of the season. I had a little bit of a sweat on this one where I was eligible to make the toilet bowl finals, and fortunately that did not happen.
Did just enough to avoid the.
Yep, that's all I care about. So, unfortunately for these two, one of them will be crowned with the last place toilet bowl.
And it's a grudge match at this point because Rugg upset Georgia Mike earlier in the year, gave him his one win on the season.
Upset and gave him his first win.
So they both have one win on the season. So this is the ultimate final decider on who is the true king of the toilet.
The last 2 weeks in a row, Georgia Mike has outscored Rugg. So if that trend continues, then we could see
he's had a much better back half of the season than first half of the season.
Yeah, we discussed it. He had a few guys who finally started getting into slightly larger roles from his rookie draft, and some of his second and third year guys have started producing a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, the last few weeks of the year, he was putting up not the worst score every week. he was still in the bottom 4 or 5, but that's a lot better than when he was 100 points worse than everyone else. So we'll see. It's going to be an exciting matchup, I think.
I feel like we should at some point note this. The 7th place matchup took place between Flinch and Criddle this week. Flinch put up 260 points.
Boy, am I glad that Flinch did not sneak in the playoffs because he put a scary amount of points up.
He had massive days from Brees Hall, who put up a 46, George Pickens, who put up a 36. Just a couple of really boom performances propelled him to that score. And if he had made the playoffs, he would probably have done some damage.
Yeah, he would have sprung an upset on somebody if he was still around.
Yeah,
that was a scare. You don't expect to see 260 points scored in the consolation bracket. Half these teams are struggling to break 100 points, so 260 is a frightening score.
Yeah, obviously we'll have to keep an eye on his team in the playoffs next year as well, or for the playoffs, I should say.
Yep, I expect him to be right there again next year on the fringes.
All right, so before we wrap up, do you have any trash talk you want to get out? Dance on Flea's metaphorical grave? Threaten Mel with, I don't know, whatever you're going to do this week with all those picks you've been stockpiling?
I don't think that would be appropriate.
I do find it fairly interesting that both Flea and Big have spent picks well into the future already. And obviously you've spent some of yours and Mel has spent some of his, but not nearly to the same extent. So now we have two guys who are in the finals with draft capital still available.
Right. Well, it just shows that there are different ways to build winning rosters, right? That's what we've seen.
Absolutely.
We've seen the final 4 teams were all built very differently. And
you're saying you're built diff?
Clearly, I scored 291 points this week. Come on.
Get it together. All right, that brings us to the end of week 16. We will be back next week. We'll cover the finals, get started on some season recap stuff then. I hope everybody has a good week. And unfortunately, due to the holiday, we were unable to get to any manager interviews for this stuff, so we're going to have to hold off on that until next time. But we'll have that soon. Thanks, and we'll see y'all soon.